Okay, so I hope everyone has made their way back. Awesome. So we're just going to start in about a minute. I will let team 5 share their screen. And yeah, let me know if you can't. Awesome. Okay, just give us a couple seconds so we get to 9:30 and then I will let you. Okay, it's 9:30. You guys can start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janki.
My name is Arvind.
Hey, good morning. I'm Kevin.
I'm June.
And today we will be presenting about our digital health application, Merci. Before we get started, we want to provide you with a quick overview. We will start with our market opportunity, then go through an introduction of our product, the advantages of it, our business model, our growth rate and projections, and our future direction, and then end with some final thoughts. Malnutrition can be caused by various factors such as inadequate calorie intake, aggressive medical treatment, treatment side effects, and issues that interfere with appetite and food absorption. For patients that are diagnosed with cancer, nutritional decline is often accepted as part of the disease and its treatment. About 20% of patients with cancer die from malnutrition rather than the actual malignancy. And as of 2017, about 27 million patients over the age of 70 are diagnosed with cancer worldwide. The prevalence of malnutrition in this patient population is 40%, and that's regardless of the cancer type. Considering all of these things, we believe there's a big market opportunity in addressing malnutrition in the geriatric cancer patient population. The clinical nutrition market is currently estimated to be $51 billion and is estimated to reach $73 billion in 2026. The geriatric patient population tends to be overlooked in their ability to maintain a proper nutritional diet. These patients are undergoing aggressive therapy for cancer, and they will experience side effects such as nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. These side effects prevent patients from absorbing all of the nutrients from the food that they intake. Some of the most common deficiencies seen are protein intake, folic acid, calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin B12. Some barriers that patients may face when trying to take care of themselves are information accessibility, information recall about their diet and side effects, and communication with their provider and medical team. Digital health is an emerging sector in the healthcare field that can have a positive impact on patient care, delivery, and disease management. Nutritional fitness apps such as MyFitnessPal and MyNet Diary allow patients to track dietary intake. However, it does not use objective data to tell patient what foods to eat, and there is no provider communication functionality. Other competitors such as Teladoc and Lark, which are both medical apps, are used for common disease state management such as high blood pressure and diabetes, and they allow patients to speak to a healthcare professional. The one downfall to those apps is that there is no side effects monitoring. With that being said, we believe the geriatric cancer patient population could benefit from a tool that provides credible health information, allows patients to easily document their dietary intake and therapy side effects, and streamlines communication with their medical team.
So next we'll be talking about the app itself. So the primary goals of our app, Merci, are to reduce hospitalizations and help manage adverse events due to nutritional deficiencies in geriatric cancer patients by empowering patients to really take control of their own health. Here we can take a look at the patient profile interface, and this is what the patients will be seeing from their end. Here, the patient profile page includes buttons for patients to see general information such as address, phone number, emergency contacts. We also have a measurements tab, which includes weight, height, BMI, a health history button, which includes past diagnoses and current medications, responses to nutritional screenings, as well as the PG-SGASF tool, which is a validated screening tool used in clinical practice. And it will help to serve to give the healthcare practitioner information about the patient's overall well-being since their last appointment. We've also included a button for recent lab values, documents, which includes after visit summaries, insurance information, as well as a your appointments button to include any upcoming appointments the patient has related to the place they're receiving care. Patients can access this page at any time by clicking the profile button here on the bottom left-hand side. So next I'll be talking about the side effect interface, which I think is one of the best parts of the app. And so when a patient is experiencing a side effect, they can click this plus button here in the middle, and it will prompt them to report any side effects they're currently feeling. We've included the most common ones, which are nausea, vomiting, fatigue, loss of appetite, as well as diarrhea, as well as an others page, so that patients can free response to write what they're currently experiencing. When reporting, each side effect will have a qualitative descriptors. For example, with diarrhea, the prompts will ask about consistency and presence of pain rather than mild, moderate, and severe. The best thing about this is that the side effects function can be accessed while the patient is on any page of the app. So next I'll be talking about the recipe page. So each patient will have a recipes feed that they can scroll through to get ideas about what kinds of food they should be eating. The list is created and curated specifically to the patient based on the deficiencies seen in lab tests. And these recipes are posted by dietitian consultants, which will be hired through Merci. Patients have the ability to like by clicking the heart button or comment by clicking on the message bubble on recipes to see what others in the community think about it. And this helps to form a sense of community because it allows patients to see what other patients are doing and see what works for them and what doesn't. Patients can access this page at any time by clicking the recipes button here on the bottom. And we just want to show that the side effects button can be accessed through this page as well. Next is the food diary interface. So the patient is able to log what foods they eat for 3 meals a day. The time that the meals are logged are saved in the heading of each meal, and the provider and patient can both access that at any time by clicking on the meal title that they want to see. The patients are able to input each component of the meal that they ate, and the app calculates how many calories each component is. And then here you can see a total calorie count on the top, which shows how many calories remain in order to hit the patient's target goal for the day. And lastly, we have the messaging system. So when the patient needs to communicate to their oncology medical team, they're able to do so with Mercy's messaging feature. The patient can access this feature at any time by using the messaging button here on the bottom right. On the left, here's a sample inbox of what the patient will see. So patients are able to see any and all messages sent and or received. Unread messages are denoted right here with a blue line on the left, and patients can send a message at any time by clicking on the send a message button here, which will then prompt this image on the right, which is a sample message for the patient. Patients can select which provider they would like to send their message to, the subject of their message, as well as include any attachments as needed. Patients can write free text on the message, and someone from the medical team responds to the message accordingly. This function was integral in order to bridge the gap in communication between providers and patients. And lastly, we have the provider interface. So this is what the providers will be seeing from their end. And it includes 2 main functionalities, one being viewing the patient profiles, as well as the messaging system I talked about earlier. So the patient profiles on the left shows a list of patients, and the providers are able to then click into patient's name and access all of the information the patient has entered and lab values such as medical history, current nutritional deficiencies, their dietary intake, as well as PG-SGASF results. And the middle on the right are again referencing the messaging system that allows to bridge the gap between provider and patient. Now, in regards to privacy and exclusivity of Merci, patients will only be able to register for an account by inputting their institution-specific MRN and their institution's name. Patients will then come up with their own username and password to log in, and healthcare practitioners will only be able to access profiles of patients under their own specific care.
I'll be talking about our clients and why they would buy our app. Merci has 2 main clients: medical institutions to use during their normal clinical practice, and pharmaceutical companies to use in clinical trials. So how does our product benefit medical institutions? Merci would result in better care on both the patient and provider's end, better outcomes, and better value. Increased patient involvement and efficient ongoing data collection of patient experience to help the provider make better decisions. Merci would help decrease malnutrition and help manage side effects, ultimately resulting in decreased hospitalizations. Appointments with providers would focus more on discussing solutions instead of collecting data about the patient's symptoms since the last visit. Hospitals would save resources and money through decreased hospitalizations and length of stay. When we corrected for inflation, we calculated that hospitals spend an extra $27,000 per hospitalization for malnourished oncology patients. According to a 2020 study, 72.7% of hospitalized geriatric oncology patients had or were at risk for malnutrition. So enabling better communication and data collection between providers and patients could save hospitals hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So our pricing is based on size of hospital and how many beds they have. Small hospitals with 100 beds or less would pay $18,000 per year. Medium-sized hospitals with 100 to 499 beds would pay $36,000 per year. and large hospitals with 500 or more beds would pay $54,000 per year. In our 5-year market penetration, there are currently a total of 1,500 accredited cancer institutes currently in the US. We aim to sell our app to 25% of them by 2027, and we aim to reach 75 institutes or 5% by the end of next year. How does our product benefit pharmaceutical companies? Mercy would increase safety, increase trial and data quality, and increase potential revenue and cost savings. Once again, this app would help doctors and patients manage side effects and malnutrition, ultimately decreasing morbidity and mortality. Regarding data and trial benefits, Mercy will serve to decrease attrition, which increases the power of a trial, making it easier to detect differences between treatment groups. Attrition is the rate of a patient dropout in a clinical trial for any number of reasons. An additional benefit is that the data collected through this app can be used for sub-analyses later on and safety data post-launch. Decreasing attrition is also the key to cost savings and increasing revenue potential for pharma companies. There's an average attrition rate of about 26% in oncology trials, mostly due to high symptom burden and fatigue, both of which are the targets of our app. For an average clinical trial, it costs about $6,500 to recruit one patient, and the cost of replacing that patient is even higher at $19,500. Prices are likely even higher for oncology trials due to a more complicated clinical status. Potential losses per delayed day of a trial can range from $600,000 to $8 million, depending on a drug's market size. Attrition could potentially cost a company billions of dollars in potential revenue due to delays or even failure to reach statistical significance. This pricing is based on both enrollment size and the importance of results. Phase 1 oncology trials enroll 20 patients on average, Phase 2 enroll 120 patients, and Phase 3 an average of 350. Phase 3 is also priced higher because the success of a drug hinges on their Phase 3 results, their statistical significance, and the speed of a trial. For Phase 4, they will be able to use the safety data to make any necessary label changes and build evidence. And for a 5-year market penetration, there are currently 700 companies running oncology trials. We aim to sell our app to 20% of total sponsors of oncology trials by 2028, and we aim to reach 30 sponsors or 4% by the end of 2023, which would be our first full year of selling to pharmaceutical companies. We don't believe that pharmaceutical companies would want to be involved with the app until it has proven efficacy in a clinical setting, so we'd start marketing to them a year later than to hospitals.
So when we achieve our market penetration targets, we estimate a compounded annual growth rate of 39% in medical institutions with a revenue of roughly $12.3 million by 2027. And for pharmaceutical companies, we estimate a CAGR of 36% with a revenue of roughly $100 million by 2028. So this shows the combined revenue from medical institutions and pharmaceutical industries. The estimated CAGR is 36% with a revenue of $86 million by 2027. And as a disclaimer, we excluded year 2022 medical institution sales when calculating the combined revenue CAGR because there are no pharma sales, and including that data would not accurately represent our growth. So this timeline captures our 5-year target as well as our long-term vision. So before 2022, during our pre-launch phase, we'll be beta testing Mercy in hospitals to finalize product development. And starting in 2022, we enter the sales and growth phase where we start selling our app. And our target by 2027 is to achieve a customer base of 25% of all cancer institutes and 20% of all oncology pharma or biotech in the United States. And after 2027 comes our long-term vision. The future of healthcare is simple. It's more efficient patient care and minimizing the loss of information that might have helped in the patient care process. And this is basically what an API or application programming interface is used for. It's simply the integration between systems to streamline communication. We strongly believe that it will be necessary to establish an API in the future to eventually become a ubiquitous part of care in the American healthcare system. And after that, we would launch our annual subscription model to our database. So the database would include data collected from Mercy, and which includes safety, side effect data, as well as lab values from patients. Oncology trials don't use traditional placebo groups because of ethical concerns and often have to rely on historical data to use as their comparator. So taking that into account, we believe our database would be useful when creating historical control groups for oncology trials. And on top of that, Medical institutions can also benefit from our database because it facilitates the healthcare professionals when counseling patients on data-driven nutritional guidance for therapeutic lifestyle changes. So just some final thoughts. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food by Hippocrates. So when learning about treatment guidelines for various diseases in school, one of the cornerstone treatments is therapeutic lifestyle changes. And although many patients are convinced of the importance of food in both causing and relieving their problems, many providers don't have the resources to fully utilize patient diet in their decision-making process. With Mercy, providers are able to get a detailed look into their patients' dietary habits, ultimately gaining a more holistic view of the patient's specific situation. And more importantly, Mercy allows patients to take an active role in controlling their health. Thank you very much, and we'll take questions.
Excellent presentation. I really like the way you narrowed the field to cancer patients, cancer geriatric patients, and the thoughtfulness you put into who your target clients would be. Excellent job. I had a question on the app itself. When the caloric count is what you kind of ended up with at the end of the day, if I can recall that correctly. So in between caloric count, you talked about, I mean, how do we know if they're putting salt on everything? How do we know they're getting enough protein? I mean, who makes that analysis between the caloric count and then whether they're doing it correctly and all those pieces that you showed at the beginning?
So I can speak about that. So we can't account for everything. You know, sodium is very difficult to track throughout the day. But at the very least, patients should be tracking their calories, and this would be a great option. Obviously, this is a very baseline prototype, and in the future, we would like to include different measurements such as how much vitamin D this patient is taking, how much calcium is in this patient's diet. But for now, we'd like to just include the calories at a minimum because calories is the mainstay of whether patients are gaining weight or decreasing in weight. And we just like to have that option that patients can track their diet more than they were used to doing, if at all.
I agree. I absolutely agree. It's a good place to start. I do think, when you add in, you don't know what kind of OTC supplements they're taking, things like that. So all of that does affect the diet, but I think this is great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, this is a great presentation. I really appreciate it. And I have a couple of questions. I'm here as a clinician. I'm curious on the hospital side of things. I'm curious about your choice to have the interface be with patients and providers as opposed to maybe the patient and the nurse or a patient and a dietitian, why that information on, say, their food diary is going specifically or their side effects is going specifically to the provider.
Speak on that. So when we were saying provider, we meant that it was going to go to like the entire healthcare team, because when you send messages in the hospital or something, the nurse can respond, or anyone on your team that has access to your healthcare information and your care can respond. So the whole team would have access to this.
So the messaging wouldn't specifically be going, say, to the physician or to the nurse practitioner who is following the case.
Yeah, it'd be the whole team that is involved in the care of this patient.
Great. And my other question, I'm curious that you chose to kind of target both hospitals, and I think it's really interesting. The pharmaceutical part of it, to me, is really interesting, and tracking the side effects of people enrolled in clinical trials. And I'm wondering, that's a two-part question, why you chose to do both, kind of the hospital and pharmaceutical branch of things, and if in tracking those side effects, the goal was just to kind of know the numbers, or if it was to impact attrition, if the people enrolled are going to be getting responses from someone as far as how to deal with those side effects, or if it's just merely to collect the data on side effects.
So in a clinical trial, this would be used the same way within a hospital, because the clinical trials are run in hospitals, right? So the clinician would still be using it. And it was mostly to decrease attrition, because when this is used, it could increase adherence to their diet, and that would eventually decrease attrition and decrease their side effects itself. Because when I looked at studies, it looked like that symptom burden and fatigue, also due to malnutrition, is the biggest reason for attrition.
Yeah.
And the reason we chose both. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, and also we want to think about, so this app would help patients now in terms of their current side effects. So a patient experienced side effect, they can get information on how to treat it. But we also wanted to think about patients 5-10 years from now, because with this app, we're getting large sets of data, and it would be a shame to not use this data for anything. So with this huge data set, we can probably think of, oh, this specific medication causes this side effect, and these are the treatment measures for the side effect. And that will help patients not only now, but 5, 10, 15 years down the road, utilizing this massive data set.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I had a question on the, from the kind of patient's perspective. You started out with, I think, a great, point around, malnutrition and cancer patients. Within the app itself, are there specific things that are linking, nutritional components to, some of the specific side effects? You mentioned recipes or so forth, but are there, cancer specific, things that are, being presented to the patient? So if they have a specific side effect, such as, nausea, where can they go in terms of figuring out, what can I do nutritionally that might help that, rather, as opposed to any sort of medication?
So the recipe page it's a feed, right? So I'm sure you guys are familiar with Facebook or Instagram, where there's a constant kind of going through the feed. But the great thing about this is this feed is specifically curated and created for this specific patient based on their past side effects profile. So say we have a patient here who has experienced nausea, vomiting 3 times in the past 2 weeks, then their feed would bring up either food recipes, therapy management, breathing exercises, yoga, the whole gamut of how can we make this patient's nausea, vomiting better. It doesn't have to be specifically catered or specifically just medications, but it can be food, it can be different exercises, just like anything that will help the patients manage their side effects better.
So based on their reported side effects within the app, their feed will be customized.
Yes, sir.
To show how to address those. Okay, great. Thank you.
And, of course.
Great, thanks for the wonderful presentation. So some few things that were interesting in your presentation that I liked was around the fact that you are very comprehensive in linking the medical to the nutrition side of things in terms of the lab measurements and of course recipe feed being customized and eventually transmitting the information to the clinical care team. One of the questions that I had was around the behavioral aspects of the app design itself. Like, you do need the patient to enter a lot of information here. You're asking them to enter symptoms, you're asking them to enter their calorie information from food. So what do you think is going to prompt them or help them to keep entering that information and to engage with your app eventually?
I can speak about that. So yes, that's such a difficult thing to do, is to kind of get that patient interaction, to incentivize patients, because it can kind of be a little bit mind numbing to constantly be inputting information throughout. So we have thought about that and some safeguards on how to encourage patients. One of them being daily or even weekly notifications on, hey, it's time to input your diary. Also, we kind of like to roll out a training program to the institutions for doctors to bring this app up to the patients in a way that would be encouraging to the patient, and just to emphasize the importance of, hey, this is an app that we would like you to use, and here are the potential benefits. Obviously, we can only do so much from the provider's end in terms of patient participation. But yeah, those are some of the things we thought about.
Yeah, certainly the providers talking about it would be a good incentive for the patients in some ways.
sorry, I just wanted to add on top of that. So some additional features, what we thought to encourage the patient to input their dietary log and all those is we thought of adding the caregiver contact or an additional family member contact onto the patient's profile so that whenever the patient forgets to log their dietary information, or let's say the patient forgot to input 2 meals in one day, then that'll send an alert to that caregiver or that family member saying that the patient has not logged in 2 meals in a day. And that'll indicate that either the patient forgot to put it or the patient has actually not had any food intake. So it'll kind of form an encouraging environment, sort of the family members and the caregivers and the patient all working together alongside with the providers, encouraging the patient to keep on track of their nutritional habits and ultimately leading to better treatment and care.
Sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. That was an awesome pitch. And so, like I was, sorry. So we were having a network portion at 12 p.m. With some of our collaborators, some of our sponsors. So you're welcome to come back at that point. And if not, then we're having our keynote speaker and awards at 1 p.m. So we hope to see you guys there. Other than that, thank you so much for your pitch. And you guys are welcome to sign off whenever.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.